goal of today's panel is to really try to look at the pros and cons of both growing organically and growing through acquisition, and why sometimes one is better than the other, and some of the issues that you might face. Since we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to give you kind of a brief background on who these guys are. I encourage you, if you have more interest, to go to the HostingCon website. They have bigger bios. And I'm also sure afterwards, feel free to come on up. The guys are happy to talk after the panel. At the end is Jamie Obelchuk. He's founder and CEO of HostPapa. HostPapa is one of the fastest growing web hosts out there. It's also a leader in green energy hoster. Jamie is a serial entrepreneur. He has started business, I think he's been at it for 25 years, starting businesses, building them up, and presumably selling them off. Arvind is founder of a company called RVeeks. Thank you. And RVeeks grows both organically at a terrific rate, and also does acquisitions when appropriate. What is very unique about RVeeks, which I don't think we can get into today, is they have close to 100 full-time employees, but they don't have an office. It's an entirely virtual company. And Arvind was also named to Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30 list last year. Harlan Ross, I think most of you know, he is ubiquitous in our industry. He's been working in the sales and marketing of technology companies since the late 90s. His company, eBridge, really plays two roles, and he'll play kind of two roles up here today. They act as an online marketing agency to help hosters grow organically, but he also acts as a consulting firm, helping hosters buy and sell other hosters and customer bases. You've probably seen his comments. He's a blogger at The Word, and you've probably seen his comments in trade publications. So just so the guys up here can have a sense can adjust their comments appropriately, can I get a show of hands of how many folks are hosters, actually are in a hosting business? All right. And how many are at companies that really only grow organically, only through just traditional sales and marketing? Okay. And how many are companies where you're happy with your rate of organic growth? All right, cool. All right, so let's start. We're going to start with the big picture and kind of narrow it down. Heartland, since you are on kind of both sides of the equation here, can you kind of give us the big picture as to what's going on, what's the current opportunity for both organic growth, what's kind of happened, and acquisitions?
So we've been in this space for a while, as Frank was saying, and the industry's obviously changed a lot over the last since sort of the century 2000. And at that time, it was a situation where you could be expensive, you could have a poor website, you could have poor service, and really, despite all you could really be in a situation where you weren't positioning yourself very well and still do extremely well from an organic standpoint. And things have changed now to the point where it's obviously the industry's much more commoditized, and the organic growth is been much more difficult. And so gradually the acquisitions scene, M&A space has become more active, more deals getting done, and that in itself has changed as well in terms of the types of deals. But at this point, this panel today is really to try to come to terms with the two approaches to growing the business, and really, in my opinion, it's not really a right or a wrong. It's that there's two approaches. Most of the business owners that I speak with really focus on whatever they feel the most comfortable with, and are curious about the other side. So all I know is marketing, but I've never done an acquisition. What does that look like? Is that something that you can talk to me about, or vice versa? And so today I think we just wanted to have a discussion around some of these topics, and see if if you can gain some insight and some a bit more sort of background and have Jamie and Armand share their experiences as well. So really encourage interactive discussion and let us know if you have any questions.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's just start off with a very big picture. Big picture pros and cons. Let's start with online with an online marketing program. And I think what we're talking about is not just a few Google AdWords, but really a robust program, to grow organically. Jamie, do you want to start?
Sure. I think you have to pick your poison where you want to focus. Unless you've got scale to handle a lot of different channels. A lot of people said that they've grown organically. I think organically, what is it that you did to grow and do it well before adding another channel and distracting, probably the limited resources that you have. In terms of the opportunity, Arvin and I have talked a lot about, with the space becoming more mature, whether this, there's been a lot of consolidation already in the last 5 to 10 years. There's still opportunities there. I think especially with people who want to exit and they've kind of plateaued on their growth. But in terms of where there's still opportunity is what niche do you want to play in? And you saw Media Temple up here last. Obviously they played in a very specific arena that GoDaddy saw potential for acquisition. There's still a lot of niches out there that have great amount of opportunity. And where do you want to place your bets? If you want to go against some of the big boys, and Frank, like you said, go into the Google AdWords jungle, I think that unless you have big budgets and can handle those cost per acquisitions, it'll be awfully difficult to start in that area. And I think Arvin is a great example of picking some specialties and growing from within. I'll throw it to Arvin.
Armand, pros and cons of a hoster starting an online marketing program?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that ultimately it comes down to how you're acquiring the customers, right? You can't use one venue. Use one venue, you're going to lose it all. I think it's a multi-blended effort, and both of us have been lucky to be in the industry at a time where getting sales from word of mouth is prevalent. So if you were to start right now, that's a different story. But you get the word of mouth type of sales, and then the CPC, buy, build, whatever after that, is a question to be answered. But if the word of mouth is not there, the customer acquisition becomes a very large issue that you need to address.
I think one of the things that I see, I was just in another panel discussion earlier this morning, and some of the ones yesterday, and the thing that I think strikes me over and over again is that there's really isn't a lot of discussion around acknowledging the size of the particular business, and so there's discussion around, well, you should do this or you shouldn't do that, or valuations or cost per acquisition figures and these types of things, and I think that it's important to understand the person who's speaking to you and their background and perspective. So, if it's someone from Media Temple, well, okay, I understand, the size of that business and the KPIs and whatnot that they're tracking. I mean, entirely different. So, I guess if we look at businesses that are, if we talk, which I'm going to go out on a limb and suspect that if I said 5 million and under, how many in this room would kind of fit that bill? But the smaller size hosters, it's a difficult space right now to be in because as Arvin said, the referral situation has changed. The cost per acquisition figures have gone up, and so if you're looking at growing organically, unless you can focus on, as Jamie said, on a niche aspect of the hosting business, it's just to be a sort of vanilla hoster is just a really, really, really difficult road to plod at this point, and so hence that's why we're getting a lot of inquiries around going the acquisition route, because people are just feeling like they're frustrated with that approach.
Why don't you just keep going now? Let's go again. Big picture, pros and cons of acquiring customers instead of using organic growth.
Well, so I don't think we have time today to go into all of the aspects of the due diligence and how to kind of structure the deals, but there's a lot of implications around the type of customers. Is there going to be consolidation of the brands when you make a purchase, or are you going to be keeping disparate brands, merging them together, having sorry, 2 a.m. is hitting me. It's cannibalization of the customer base. So if you've got different price points when you're looking at purchasing, another customer base. So there's a lot of implications around that, and I think it just needs to be well thought out. We were talking earlier, just before the panel came on, about sort of the discussion around an exit strategy, and ultimately at some point you presumably would like to sell, and so thinking of if you're looking at growing through acquisition and you've got different brands, what is that going to look like for you at an exit point? So I'll let Arvind go.
Yeah, I don't think there's any magic answer here. Is that do you build or buy? It depends on your situation, where you're at in the industry. Exit strategy is big because that ultimately comes into your valuation of what you think in your head you're worth. So you can buy at a value, and you can also acquire at a value. I think that the purpose of this, and this is what I hope we come across here, is that kind of a discussion across, at this point in time, what is more worth it for you? What's more worth it for me is different than what's worth it for you. That's completely different. And I'll go across and say what's more worth it for me. Maybe acquisition, maybe just growing. And we're in that unique space, but it may not be the same for you. And we're going to explore all that. But overall, that's the goal here, right?
I think we don't want to come across as naysayers either, because it's still a growing market. There's still a lot of opportunity. I've been on a lot of these panels in different industries. It seems like when it's mature, it's always the same thing, which is the money's already made. I don't think that that's the case. I think that there's a lot of potential for whether you're hosting, managed WordPress, or you want to host applications, or be specific to a particular market or vertical. I knew people that went from shared hosting to develop a very large CDNs. There's always money to be made, and I think really, where do you want to pick your poison? If you want to go out and buy a company, realize that also comes with pitfalls, and you need to have the organization and structure around it in order to acquire. If you have already a going concern, you need to be able to roll that into your existing operation. As Heartland said, are you going to run 2 separate brands? Are you going to inform your customers that similar to what web.com has recently done with Register and Network Solutions, now everything's under one umbrella, and create a little bit of confusion, or with Endurance everything's kept separately. Hey Joe, I think you got to pick where you want to play. As far as buying, there's opportunity out there. I think it's all related to cost per acquisition. What's that customer worth, lifetime value? What's the investment? Are the people that are divesting, are they staying on board, or are they not? What do they bring to the table? Like Media Temple is a perfect example. Most of the people stayed on, and GoDaddy sees their value there. My friend Michael Carr in front, my hosting was acquired by, Softcom was acquired by Ingram Micro, and everybody stayed on because Ingram Micro saw value. So I think it's all particular to where you want to work, where you want to operate. If you want to market and grow, I think the key thing is what channels are you going to pick and be the expert. If you're going to be alternative channels like a Kissmetrics or some successful companies that have done content marketing, it's a long ride, but you can be very successful in that with a lower cost per acquisition compared to playing in AdWords, as an example. So there's still opportunity out there on both the buy side and the operating side.
Let's talk a little bit more about, and these are some topics we're going to try to get to, and I'm not, panels tend to go in their own direction, so I'm not sure we're going to get to them all. Sure. Let's just talk about the resources required to either implement a robust online marketing program or implement a customer acquisition program. And you can pick either one, whatever you're best suited for. But people, internal resources, systems to track success. For a small hoster who wants to do an online marketing program, they may require some systems. So, Jamie, do you want to start us off? And
it goes back to the channels again. If you want to run an affiliate program, do you have the affiliate tracking software to do that? Do you have the expertise in-house? Do you want to use a network like Commission Junction? You can outsource it completely to, there's many outsourced program managers out there that are very good, that might get you to the goal faster. And then you're competing again in your niche, and how are they going to recruit people with traffic, which are affiliates or publishers that maybe run blogs or are professional marketers. If you're running AdWords, who's going to do that for you? It's complicated. I call it an asset control panel now. It's not easy to play in that space. If you want to go organic, Panda update, Penguin update, Iran can talk about that. That's a long haul, and now that's all about content marketing. So you can't gauge the system unless somebody knows. Come see me, because I'd like to learn. But you really can't gauge that system anymore. You need to go for the long haul. So I think it's more about, again, who around you knows that particular channel and can get you to the end goal faster, rather than trying to do it yourself, and you're going to take double or triple the amount of time and probably more energy and money than you want to invest. And again, it all goes back to know your metrics, which is your cost per acquisition, lifetime value of customer, retention. Those are all key bottom line principles that you need in order to grow an effective hosting business.
Okay, Ravon?
I mean, it's the same story, right? So it is customer acquisition. Is it worth buying or building? And whatever costs go into it, ultimately the last number that it hits for us as a company. Now, if you were to, say, acquire a $50,000 a year company, we can play around with those numbers and get to somewhere that makes sense for us. On the acquisition side, as he was saying, we can't really play with numbers. That's what it is. So it really depends on where you're at, what are you dealing with, and how can you change the numbers to make it make sense. If I were to say right now, I would love to acquire all day long, but we can't because we're limited in resources. And so are they. But when it comes to acquiring customers organically, we're also limited in resources. But what helps us overall is that obviously we have the word of mouth and whatever that comes in. But that's the math. That making sense of the math is, what is the math for you? For us, acquisitions, if the math makes sense, which we can make it make sense, works. Can you make it make sense with Google? You have less leeway there. So it depends on.
I think even switching channels, Arvin, like, you look at what Dropbox did. Go read about the online story about their launch in AdWords and their effective cost per acquisition. They would not be around if they continued with that and switched to the Refer a Friend program. And obviously that took off for them because the word of mouth was so great in terms of the incentive on both sides by getting more space. So there's a classic example of taking, I think they were the 40th or 50th product in that sync and share space. So you don't even have to be first to market. You just have to do it well. And that's a classic example of what can you do. And there's other companies that run very good Refer a Friend programs as an example.
And I mean, neither of us are going to be in the position right now to say that bidding on web hosting as a keyword is going to make sense, right? So yeah. That's making sense of the math. There's going to be keywords that are going to make sense, and there's going to be keywords that are not going to make sense for us where we're at. Things change depending on size, so that's making sense of the math on acquisition sides and on growing organically, depending on where you're at.
Well, let's talk about some numbers. Heartland, what does it cost to acquire a customer? And let's just make it easy. Let's just do a shared.
There's a loaded question for you, Heartland.
Let's just do a shared hosting customer, and there's a variety of costs that go into it, just not the cost of the customer, legal and all that. Do you want to within 3 or 4%, please?
Yeah, right. So just to answer that
as accurate as possible.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
please. I've got my pencil.
Just get my calculator. No, I think that when you're looking at this, just to segue from some of the discussion there, I mean, there's a lot of different costs that go into it, right? So, I mean, Jamie's talking about commission junction and whatnot. Well, I mean, there's costs associated with that, significant costs associated with that. Hiring program managers to manage affiliate programs. AdWords, okay, well, you know, are you talking about the getting to the point where you've actually optimized it so that you've got a formula that's working? Or are you talking about fooling around with it, playing around with like Dropbox did, with numbers that for a while are just entirely unsustainable? But you know, if you're looking at a shared and you got some stability long term, Jamie, you know the space better than anybody. But you know, 120 to 200 type of thing would be you know, typical range, and 200 may not be sustainable.
Is that organic or acquisition?
Sorry, that's organic.
I think Harlan's talking about paying a commission.
I'm talking about the equivalent, the effective that'd be either a commission or you know, an effective conversion rate. Now, if you're amortizing those over you know, all the acquisitions that the organic client acquisitions that you're obtaining that are not through paid sources such as referrals or you know, just direct acquisitions, obviously the number is going to be amortized down significantly lower than that, and then there'll be, you know, the upsells that you can get from that. But you know, that's a kind of a. And
does that include the people you have? I mean, obviously, to run a marketing team, you've got got marketing people, you've got social.
No.
And
yeah.
so
no,
can you give us a
if you look at 10 years ago in 2004, you might pay for a $9.95 plan, you might pay $40, $50, right? So your influx of cash on the credit card was always higher than the commission paid. As the market consolidates and bid prices get raised or whatever you're doing, you take affiliates as an example. If you log into CJ, you might see base plans of $100 or $120 paid to a tracked commission, and I use the word tracked because that's a cookie being placed generally that gets paid, not generally paying, you know, guys who call in directly or referrals outside, but what you actually pay out in commission, not what you would spend to manage that program either. Taking that to the extreme, the higher end affiliates, you know, are certainly, you know, demanding a gross of $200 for sure, especially with some of the larger players that are in the space. Unless you have a brand like a GoDaddy out there and maybe people want to leverage your brand. If you're brand new to the space, they're investing in your brand, right? So nobody knows you. GoDaddy's in the Super Bowl. You have to try to beat them and share. That's why when you look at the niche players like WP Engine and Managed WordPress, or you know, it's a little bit easier to market and operate and get traction there because people want to specifically talk about those programs. That's why I think there might be more opportunity if you're starting out and want to grow organically. Be the best Drupal host in the market. Be the best Joomla host and manage programs, and you'll find that it's a lot easier for people, you know, that have been hacked in their WordPress or Joomla site, and they're looking for the small business guys looking for somebody to manage for them. You'll find your acquisition costs are significantly less. On the sell side, it's if you're buying a host, it's very similar. You just need to calculate, you know, depending on their plans, if they're billing out monthly, annual, triannual, 10-year plans, have they taken the cash and you have to support the customer until the next renewal? What's the renewal rate? What's their attrition rate? And what's your effective cost per acquisition of that particular host? As soon as you figure that out and you can roll that into what's acceptable, you can then compare it against your organic channels and say, am I better off to build or buy? However, when you buy, you're also buying all the historical good or bad of that particular client, whether there's brand equity in there or the brand has been slammed online. I think you really got to do your due diligence there. I think Endurance has done a great job of doing that with the brands that they've acquired, and is a good example of how to do it well, right?
And is there a market price for not organic acquisition, but acquisition?
You know, so I mean, going back, I didn't address the organic acquisition of customers. Going back to exactly what I said earlier, what works for me is not going to work for majority of the people here, but my numbers may show something about my business that, you know, can be used elsewhere to replicate. So for example, I mean, if I were to blend everybody together, cost of acquisition is like, I don't know, 65, 70, right? That makes sense. Now, cost of acquisition when it comes from the affiliate channel, directly from the affiliate channel, if I don't blend in my unique, you know, dealing with Joomla and WordPress or whatever, we're like, you know, 150, 135 to 150 is where we're at. Now, some of the people that raised their hands earlier that said they're still growing, you know, they're above that. So what does the blended rate make sense at? And can you make the blended rate come down as best as possible? I feel like that's the game right now when it comes to organic growth. Going to acquisitions, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, there's a lot of risks involved when you go into acquisition. I try to hit $100 an account. That's what it is. But we don't do big acquisitions, just small things, and that's my risk, right? Now, if I were to acquire through a top list, we're at 150, 200, you know, where we're at. I'm not going to go to 250 route, but when it comes to acquisition, I'm like, I'm taking that risk, so I'm not going to pay the 150, but I'm also not going to pay the blended rate of 50, 60, 70, because it's an easy account that I'm going to just blend in with the rest of my accounts. So that's where I'm at, and I think it's really, where is he at, where I'm at,
Yeah.
And what has Heartland seen, not dealing with just us, everyone else.
So
And then you
Heartland on the buy side, on the buying and customer side, not through organic growth. What have you seen?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to look at
Thanks.
everything that Jamie and Arvin said around, and what I said earlier around the CPA figures, and you want to compare that to purchasing outright. So, you know, if you were to, for instance, just because the math's easy, if you said it was $8 a shared customer paying $8 a month, so it's more or less $100 a year, and so you're going to pay you know, around, let's say, 1 times the annual revenue. So. So in that instance, you know, you'd pay basically $100 for that customer, on the assumption that, as Jamie said, that they're not, you know, they haven't prepaid for extended periods of time and whatnot. But basically on an annualized basis, and the recurring, that customer is worth about $100. So now you can compare that. But the thing is, then there's other things, right? So typically that cost is going to be based on the assumption that if you're going to migrate that customer, that the buyer takes the migration risk. So you're going to lose some of those customers as part of that transaction. So all of a sudden now your what would be equivalent of $100, and your one-time figure is going to be a little bit higher than that. So as Arvin said, there's lots of certainly lots of risk. I think if due diligence is done properly, it certainly you can mitigate you know, a majority of that, and also of course how you structure the deal will help with that.
What about differences in customer quality? Is a customer that you add organically more or less likely to churn than a customer you acquire, who may have been a hosting customer for 3 years before you acquire them versus somebody you add right away? Are there differences you can count on, or are they? Or is
well, I just think organically, you know, I would imagine that you're involved in the whole process, so you understand process. I guess that's my Canadian coming out. You know, you're involved in the whole aspect of where that customer came from, so you will know, hopefully, what your customer profile is. When you acquire, in your due diligence, you really need to consider what channels that particular company divesting used in acquiring those customers, and then what is their retention rates. So as you look at Arvin's magic number is $100, I know Arvin would take a look at the attrition rate of those customers, and were they churning off, and were they using vehicles like get-rich-quick schemes or something like that to acquire customers, right? Or did they give it away to try and get a renewal? Those things are, I would say, not great channels of acquisition. If the company's been around a long time, they're maybe in the dedicated space, you know, those servers never move, they're always there. You can prove it in the due diligence with, you know, bank statements and merchant statements, and talk to some of those customers. Then maybe that marker goes up. Maybe it's worth more, right? Maybe you want to be in the dedicated space. Anybody want to sell a dedicated? No? Okay.
So Arvon, you've got two pools of customers. You've got your average, kind of the average organic growth customer, and you've got these customers you acquired for $100. Is there a difference?
There obviously is, right? And that's where we bring in the risk factor. What is the risk factor? To be honest with you, at some point in time, we acquired, maybe 500 customers that are better than customers we acquired organically because of where they came from, right? So there's overall, though, I would say that 80%, 90% of the time, customers we acquire organically are better than if we just brought them on board, because of the way we do acquisitions, because of my magic number, because of how I manage risk. That's the way it works out for us. Organic works better, but that's not necessarily the right way to think about it. That's how it works for us.
So our experience has been, essentially anecdotal through our clients, but Jamie, feel free to chime in. But generally speaking, the majority of the customers, if you're going to lose them, are going to happen close to the transition, like the migration or the transition from the seller to the buyer. So once there's some stability there, and particularly the less boat rocking is done, the better. And so if you can mitigate that, then in terms of churn and whatnot, then if there's a history of those customers having been with the seller for an extended period of time already, then I think the chances of losing them, assuming you don't do anything catastrophic yourself, like outages and migrations that get botched, then it should be pretty minimal. But you certainly don't have the same degree of control as you would, in an organic type of purchase.
Yeah, we've had one couple where they were just happy that there was hope. We actually answered the phone on a sport call, right, when they never had that before. So we actually maybe re-energized the brand and took it to the next level. So there's opportunity out there, there. If I imagine if you talk to Heartland and Frank, there are people that are actively selling. And if you're in that space and you want to sell, because it is a 24/7 operation, it's tiring. There's people out there that may want to take what you built, and maybe want to do something new with your life. So I think there's definitely opportunities on both sides of the equation for sure on the build and buy.
But here's an interesting question. I mean, if you're a hoster that's struggling with growth, can you buy growth? In other words, can you buy a brand that's growing vibrantly and then bring it onto your shop and keep it going? Is that possible?
Well, the first question is, do you have the money to buy, right? That's the.
Well, I think that's the assumption. I think that's the assumption. So.
Or can get the money.
Or we can get the money.
Rich uncle.
The Canadian government seems to.
Yeah, they do well.
Easier than.
Well, I think the biggest financiers in the hosting business is MasterCard and Visa. But
MasterCard, Visa.
There you go. Or American Express.
Or American Express, yeah.
But.
Well, if they're growing, why would they want to sell? That's the one question, right?
That is one question. Like, if you were to take my blended rate, why would you sell when my blended rate is at 70 or 80? There's other factors. It's like, we're at a point where, it's we got there and we need to take some chips off the table, and that happens in the industry. Yeah. So those are good buys, and then there's buys where it's a distressed property. And going back to customer retention, what is your magic number? Because you're never going to get right there to figure out what is the value of that of that property that you're acquiring. So I would say that going back to the conversation is if you can buy, would you buy? For me, it's almost always comes down to my magic number, and if I were to fail to satisfy that magic number, that means that I didn't do proper due diligence, and if I were to beat it, I did proper due diligence.
We're focused on customers too. The other side to acquisition, is there any talent or market that you want to go in where you don't have that expertise and you see an opportunity, intellectual property, intellectual capital that you can pick up And you also have to factor that in. Maybe there's some good young guys that have something, and you know, they just don't know how to get the traction in the market. So you say, there's a great acquisition that we could leverage within our own base of customers, which is something else that we've done too.
I think the other aspect here is that if the company is growing significantly and it's a company that you want to buy and you're not, the question is why are they growing? I mean, that would be a question I'd ask, and if they're growing based on you know, a niche market or some specific knowledge or you know, contacts that are being leveraged or relationships or, you know, referrals or whatnot, then obviously in order to maintain that growth you'd need to maintain whatever is inherently underlying that growth. And so if it's simply just acquiring those customers, I think you're just going to end up adding to your customer base and have a similar growth. So having a seller that's willing to stay on and basically aid in that process and potentially be a part of a new entity going forward is probably you know, a discussion that's worth having.
You know, the other question here is, you know, we've talked a little bit about risks in the process. And maybe we could, I know this is going to be tough, but maybe we could just focus on the bigger ones. But, you know, if a hoster who's kind of struggling with organic growth, perhaps, you know, hires somebody to help them develop and do an online marketing program, there is a risk that they're going to succeed. And I guess that's the question. What are the risks of success, in the bigger risks for doing an online marketing program and for buying customers inorganically? What are the big risks here that the folks in the audience need to pay attention to when trying to grow in either method? That make sense?
So essentially, the risks of success.
The risks of
the
risks of not succeeding. What are the big risks that, you know, if you're advising somebody who wants to do an online marketing program, you know, do they all work? Does every online marketing program work? Where do they fail?
Right. Well, I think I mean, if it's online marketing, it's a matter of there's just initially a lot of testing that needs to be done to determine, you know, who you got to understand who your target audience is and all those types of things. But beyond that, then you got to test all the different tactics and establish some kind of baseline figures, and that process is costly and time consuming. So it's a quick answer.
I think on both fronts it's an obvious answer, but then we never do it, right? So it's like, okay, is the customer going to last with us? Are they going to pay as much as we think they're going to pay us? But how many of the hosts out there are actually doing the math for it, right? So that's the acquisition part of things, organic acquisition. And then there's the acquisition part of things is you acquire these customers, and did you keep track of the fact that, yeah, did their expiration day was just right before your buy date? And now you're not going to see that for another 2 years. Are you ever going to see that, right? So those are obvious things to think about, but you never do it. And I think at that point you just need to give yourself a kick in the ass and just sit down and figure it out. It's obvious to us what we need to do. It's just
pick a channel.
Yeah,
do it well. I don't think there's no magic bullet. You know, find a way to go acquire your first customer. How did you do it? Do it again. You know, I'd say rinse and repeat, but it doesn't work for me.
All right. Well, let's talk about customer acquisitions, not organic.
Yep.
What are the types of things that you do to protect yourself? Or when you buy the 500 customers, you know, what are the things you look at or you do, kind of the major ones, to make sure that you're not going to be burned?
And I think through talking to, you know, the major acquirers in the market and everything else, you get a sense of regular things, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a lot of 1 year plus type of customers? That's right there. That's obvious. Aside from that, I think is there customers that are paying for something that they're not necessarily seeing the value of? Mm-hmm. They're not going to renew at that point in time. It's what are they getting for what they're paying for? And that's personally are my two big rules, right? Are they paying for something way ahead of time, and are they paying for something that has some value? If they're paying for something that has some value, and they're paying on a consistent basis, monthly, 6 month, 1 year, then then you can really look at that.
Yeah, the back Arvin up, they're paying for a subscription. So, if anything, provide good service and good customer service, and make sure your servers stay up. That's the bottom line. And I think some companies fail at doing that, right?
I think we could talk, this whole session could be just dedicated on this question alone, but if in terms of doing due diligence with on the acquisition side, looking to make sure that, first of all, are these customers really customers? So are these customers that the host thinks that they have, or do these do the domains resolve to the servers? Is there tracking the flow of money? So if the sellers says they're collecting a certain amount of money, are they actually collecting that? Does it follow it all the way through to the bank account? There's a lot of due diligence questions, and as I say, I think this whole panel could be dedicated to that, and it's not. But
well, I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to throw it open to the audience. I guess in growing your businesses, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started out, or maybe what are the biggest mistakes you've made along the way, the hard lessons?
From yesterday, you mean?
And I know you're going to have to think hard because you guys probably haven't made any mistakes.
Yeah.
But in the unlikely event, Jamie, that you made a mistake along the way, or a lesson that you've learned along the way.
I got asked this by a magazine writer once, and it's maybe Arva can jump in on this, but we're also in the people business, and attracting, retaining quality people that go along with your plan has always been the hardest thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's for us. Michael, you always have good people because you're in downtown Toronto, but we're in the suburbs. But I think that's along the way is try and retain quality people. There's a lot of opportunity out there. People make a business, and I think that's the pitfall that we've come across. Arvin?
I think from a product side, people and service, right? Is the product good, and are the people good? And you always have regrets there based on decisions that you've made. As far as on the acquisition side of regrets, I think the way we've grown, which hasn't been really mainstream, my regret has been maybe the niches that we identified we didn't hit hard. We were satisfied with what the niche brought in, which, if we hit hard, we would have dominated in a way where it didn't allow.
So once you found a niche that was working, you felt you didn't jump on it hard enough.
Own it.
You just as a pure example, right? I mean, as a shared hosting company, we hit the open source software. We got OpenCart, where we got them. OpenCart is a shopping cart software. We did not expand upon that and say, this is it. We are going to hit this. We're gonna get PrestaShop, whatever. We missed out on those opportunities when everyone else.
Or deeper into OpenCart.
Or deeper into OpenCart, which is a regret right now, right? I mean, that's what we have to do right now. I mean, it's one of those things that's obvious. Going back to the obvious, but you really need to push yourself.
But that goes back to the opportunity, which is there's always something like that. There's always something new. How can you be the best at that? And then where is that traffic coming from? And who are the communities? Who's the forums? What events? What shows do they attend? Should I get a booth at that show and just be the best? I don't know. One open source script that you find in Softaculous or Fantastical, but that's what we do, and everybody that's in that community knows us as the best. That's how you can grow really quick, right? But if you try to play the general game, you're going to play against general large pockets in the organic side.
Harlan, the mistakes you've seen made that you really counsel people to try to avoid?
Well, let's just go number. I think one of the things, and this sort of comes from a core belief for me, is just coming from a position of integrity and sort of doing what's right. And so when I look at some companies in the past who've had problems with you talk about people, whether it's customers or the people that work for you, and I've seen issues on leadership issues with internal staff, and then I've seen issues with customers. And I think that in this world, with as social as it's become, the importance of is the customer wrong? Have they abused your terms of service? Have they used the unlimited bandwidth? Are they actually trying to take advantage of that? And yes, and did they breach the contract? Maybe. Is it worth fighting them? You got to make that decision, because there's a reasonably good chance it's going to end up in a review, and those reviews are deadly from a marketing perspective. And so, I think that looking at sort of the big picture and not being too short-sighted to refund the customer their $80 or whatnot, just to make that problem go away. It's a much more expensive problem when they're on the first page of Google with negative reviews. So I would say that people is a huge piece, whether customers or internal.
Questions? Tom.
Yes, I'm Tom Millitzer, NCC lead represent sellers. And what I noticed during the presentation is that you mentioned your $100 function. The question is how you pay for that. The size of deals you're doing, I'm going to guess here that part of it's seller funds, earnings. So basically, we're looking at a situation where the cash you're putting in is fairly unrisky, because there's no cash going in, it's going out with the tenant. You had also mentioned that numbers like $100, $200 for a affiliate, which is in a sense, as you said, I believe you said in 2009, it was self-liquidating up front. You get a $10 rate, you're paying an annual rate of $120. So again, we would get a self-liquidating type situation until you get above the cost that you're actually subsidizing that affiliate with additional cash. So from what I'm hearing is it's which devil I want to play with. Because you get in an acquisition situation, unless you're really putting cash on the table, your risk is fairly low.
I guess it's an excellent question. How do you guys finance both your acquisitions and the cost of customer acquisition, and how risky do you perceive it?
We have to put a star next to that at $100 on the acquisition side, because a lot of that has been prepaid too, right? So you're supporting a customer where somebody else has gotten the revenue, where you're paying out an affiliate commission. You're generally getting some revenue in, right? But we'll go back. There are many companies that have come in the last 2 years in different industries that have reduced their cost per acquisition in a very reasonable level. DigitalOcean is a perfect example of a company that has come in, has owned a space, in terms of cloud-based hosting for developers, containers, come out of nowhere, right? So I think when you look at what poison you want to pick, you have to value those customers. Like if Arvin's going to, let's say you want to get into a new niche, he's talking about organically going in and growing. That doesn't mean there might be an opportunity in that niche already with somebody who wants to exit. So you go in and pick up that, and you automatically become one key player in that space. So I think, Tom, there's really, where do you want to play? And very few companies can do both well. Is the other thing. Like, you have to have people on both sides to be able to do the acquisitions and to be able to do organically, right? So, and I think you can attest to that too, right? It's not easy doing either way, right?
Yeah, I think, the star is even bigger than that. Let's back out. We're talking about shared hosting right here,
yeah.
Right? So, at this point in time, we're all living on the cloud. So, you want to go in the VM route? That's a whole different calculation that you're going to do.
Yeah.
And migration on the VM side comes at a
price.
Cost, so you need to factor that in. But I think what you're getting at is, where's the money at? And I think I made a joke about that, Canadian money and US money. There's
not the peso
there's that
anymore,
factor of
though,
things, but let's just say that doesn't exist. It comes in as, regardless of your bank account, do you structure or do you not? And there's no right answer. I think the right answer is what works for you. For us, we have to structure. And it has to be somewhat of a distressed property. So that's for us. Now, if it was a brand that was growing, it was doing well, you know, terms are different. You're going to have to come up with the cash. And you're going to have to come up front, and it's not going to be as structured. But those are circumstance type of things. All I can say is what we do, which is in almost 100% of times, it's structured, which is what I had not seen a lot, but as I talk to a lot of the people in the industry, that seems to be a trend. Because if you're growing, you're not selling. If you're not, it's distressed and you're structured.
Other questions?
When you're acquiring the location of the customers, does that play in at all for the risk or looking at it? Like, do you actually make a purchase on like North America, those customers look good, and maybe Asia, you might say, you know what, I might take a step back, even though they might be growing, or they could acquire. See where I'm going.
Yeah, I think I can answer that. We're pretty geographically dispersed, so yeah, I think every market's different, and you know, if you're going to acquire a market that you don't understand, who's going to be the person that's going to operate that for you moving forward? So if you want to support in a language that necessarily is not your #1 language, let's say, how are you going to do that moving forward? But there's definitely large opportunities in emerging markets, very large in all aspects of hosting, and in terms of the risks, I think each country brings a different layer of risk, right? So if how do you do due diligence in something that you don't understand maybe, and you know, get support from a legal or accounting perspective? That's why bringing in some intermediaries might help that understand that market a little bit better, you know, when you're looking at that opportunity on the buy side.
Let me expand the question, though. I think there's two parts to the question. You could be buying a customer that is billed in Canadian dollars,
yes,
and you provide support to in Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
You could be buying a customer that is you could be buying a German hoster where they're billed in euros, and you've got to provide support in euros.
So you're going to need a payment.
Those are different.
You're going to need a payment processor that supports that currency. Otherwise, you're going to hit your customers with foreign exchange on their credit card. So, you know, can you support euros, pounds, rupees, peso, whatever you want to do?
Yeah, I think.
But if they're German, then I would imagine the primary language you need, and credit cards might not be actually. They're Germans in the room. Most don't use credit cards, right? Drafts, yeah, so they're using wire. So you know, there's a difference there. So understanding that localization is certainly important. And then I'm going to buy a German host, but I don't have any German support, right? So all that whole customer base obviously expects it. How am I going to do that? Am I going to outsource that? Am I going to hire more people? Factor that into the deal, right?
And I think what's been mentioned here, as far as the business side of things, it is obvious. You're buying a German customer, right? How are you going to build them? You should think about that. And I think majority of us think about it. Sometimes we don't actually think about what's going to happen afterwards. And that's the problem with the business side of things, is how are you going to build them? How are you going to support them? That sort of thing. To answer your question from a technological aspect, that's the big star that he was mentioning earlier, is that if we're talking about shared hosting, then I have a philosophy. Other people have different philosophies, is that if I'm within the continent that hoster is in, I'm good. I'm not doing game server hosting or whatever else that requires really fast access to the server, so I'm good. But you know, other shared hosters that I compete with directly have different philosophies on that. So that's a personal philosophy.
I'd say there's two. I mean, everything, without repeating anything here again, everything that Jamie and Aaron have said, I agree with. I think that the other aspect, and this came up on a conversation with a client yesterday that I had, which is a really significant issue that they overlooked, but is reasonably something you should be give consideration to, is the perception from the customer base that's being acquired, of what their perception will be of being bought by a foreign entity. So if let's say it's in Europe and they're being bought by an American or Canadian company, you know, how are they going to? Are they going to be concerned that perhaps that all their data and their sites are now going to be hosted in North America somewhere? Are they concerned about that? Or just the mere fact that there's some sort of patriotism and nationalism that you know, you're sort of poking, And so, and that can happen in even in a Canadian U.S. Type deal. So I think that's a really big factor. And then also, just to reiterate what they said, don't underestimate how the implications and potentially how difficult it might be to get merchant accounts in different currencies, and frankly whether it's worth it. I mean, there's a hassle process, potentially tax implications and whatnot, and it's not an easy process.
Unfortunately, I think we're getting kicked out. The panelists are happy to talk afterwards, so come on down and chat with them, and please join me in thanking them.